All right, that should allow attendees in. All right, I figure, well, we're waiting for attendees to come in. We'll start at noon proper. But I figure I'll have everybody introduce themselves. We'll go alphabetical by first name, and then I will toss a question out and see where we go.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'll keep an eye on the chat in here for any potential questions. We've got the Q&A, and we've got the Discord that I probably can't keep a weather on Discord at the same time. So there's only so much multitasking I can do.
Exactly.
I'm watching the Discord though, so if just anything pops up, I'll let you know.
Awesome, thank you. All right. Welcome everyone to the authors and social media panel. I'm very excited to be here today. We have 4 excellent authors who are going to walk us through pros, cons, tips, tricks, pitfalls, etc. We'll start off with introductions. Joe, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Joe Fontana. I'm a hybrid author. Good to see everybody.
John?
Hi, I'm John Wilker. I'm a indie published author here in Denver, Colorado.
Mer?
Hey, I'm Mer Lafferty. I am a podcaster and author and short fiction editor at Escape Pod. And yeah, glad to be here. I'm also on Twitter, mostly for social media purposes.
And I'm Steve Resnick Tim. I'm an author, written a lot of short stories, several novels, and a lot of my stories are collected.
Awesome. So I guess since Murray, you mentioned it, let's go ahead and start off. What social media platforms are you spending your time on?
I spend like 95% of my time on Twitter. I remember that I have an Instagram and should probably put something on it. I think Facebook is a tool of the devil, and I don't even believe in the devil. And I have accounts other places, and I just feel sorry for people when I get notifications that they're following me on something I haven't looked at in years. So that's not good. I wish I could be more connected, but I don't think to look other places than Twitter. So that's possibly a downfall.
For me, it's Twitter. I am pretty active on Instagram. Twitter is by far maybe the most. I have a Facebook account. It's still mostly just pre-writer Facebook, so it's just friends and family and interacting. I chat occasionally with a reader through my author page, but it's mostly friends and family. And yeah, like Mer, I have plenty of abandoned accounts elsewhere. But yeah, Twitter and Instagram is really where I'm likely to be visible.
Well, I primarily use Facebook, even though I think it's extremely toxic and not good for most of us. But I got into the habit, and it's fairly easy to use. And a lot of people I know, friends and fans, are on there. So I continue to use it, although I try to limit my time. Particularly pay attention to what the threads are, and if it's a really dark and toxic thread, I just get off of it as quickly as possible. So I just try to watch my behavior on Facebook and moderate who my so-called friends are, I guess. I also use Twitter. I've never been as handy with Twitter. I tend to retweet a lot, and I look for things I'm interested in and retweet those, and sometimes I make announcements on Twitter, and my Twitter feed is also duplicated on my on the front page of my website. So I use it that way. I also use Pinterest a lot for planning books. If I'm very image conscious when I'm writing, so when I start a new book, I will accumulate lots of images having to do with that book. I know when I was writing Yubo, I had a large accumulation of images, and I put those on Pinterest and made them accessible to readers so they could refer them to that so they can look at it. I've used Instagram a little bit, but not lately.
I mostly use Twitter. Facebook is basically abandoned. I only talk to friends on that now. And the new format is absolutely horrible and it drives me crazy.
Yes.
And so I can't stand to be on it for any length of time anymore. I do have Instagram though, like I abandoned it. I only do stuff when I remember, but it's not really author stuff. It's more personal stuff. So it's not really an author account. So everything I do usually is on Twitter. And Instagram, I find it's very hard to, at least for me, to connect with other people on Instagram. I would rather use Twitter because you can respond to them in real time. Like Steve, I also use Pinterest, but I just usually put up either book cover prototypes or book covers and stuff like that on Pinterest. So it was very limited.
+1 for the new look on Facebook. That has helped me limit my use of it quite a bit.
I haven't seen the new look, and I don't know if they're just rolling out slowly, and
I think so.
Or I was kind of hoping maybe they forgot me. But,
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
No, they have something called Social Fixer that I use, but after a couple days, you have to like refresh it. Like you have to push a button. A friend of mine turned me onto it, but I still don't go on Facebook anymore just because, well, it's inconvenient to use that. I think it's a Chrome add-on.
Yeah.
If I'm correct, but I just don't like it.
No, and actually that's a good segue because my next question was going to be, are any of you using any tools like Hootsuite or, oh, I forget the other one, Thunderclap or things like that to either schedule your social media or to send it across multiple platforms simultaneously, things like that?
I do. I use Hootsuite, not exclusively for my writing. I do conferences as my still day job. So I use a lot for that from just general marketing. But since I have it, I was like, well, I might as well add my writing social media stuff to it. But I tend to only use it for announcements. Like if there's a sale coming up or a new release, I'll schedule like a tweet a day kind of. That way it mixes in with whatever I'm normally tweeting or Instagramming or whatevering. And it's not just over the top, but in between other stuff, like I don't schedule anything in between that.
I think
I use a WordPress. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, I think life's already a little too complicated for me. So I pick up pieces of software and I try them, and I just never use them more than 1 or 2 days. So the only thing I do, my webmaster set up the system where my tweets are duplicated on my web page, but that's really all I've done. I've looked at the other things, and it'd probably be great if I used some of them, but I just know I wouldn't do it.
You were saying, Mer?
I have a plugin for WordPress that posts to Twitter and Tumblr, which I forgot about. And so I'm often putting things on Tumblr, but I never, ever, ever look at it. So it's like I could go viral on Tumblr and never know. But yeah, I do that. And then my assistant does, I had her set up TweetDeck so that she could schedule promotional tweets for me. So I'm not using it, but she is. So I guess that counts. I'm still not, I really do need to. One of my problems is I'm not very visually focused. So that's why I don't think Instagram, I don't use my camera a lot. So I'm not really sure how to reach an audience that is visually focused. I mean, description is the hardest thing for me in books. So it's hard for me to think about what pictures people would like to look at. So I wish I could be more on Instagram, but I can't think that way. I don't know.
We had a question from the audience while we're talking tools. Becca says she's been using Canva for managing her Twitch channel announcements for Facebook and Twitter. Is anyone using that platform? Do we have any opinions on it?
I haven't heard of it.
I haven't heard of it either.
Oh, new one to me.
Fair deal. Maybe it's something for people to look into.
Yeah.
How much of your time would you say, compared to your writing and the rest of your life, you spend on social media?
I think it depends on the day for me. I tried to avoid the pitfall of merging writing with my other day job, and because I work in public health, I can't. And so, like, you know, right now during the pandemic, so right now I'm on there a lot more than I normally am, because usually my account is basically just the writer account, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. And since I'm a public health professional, I kind of feel like it's my duty to read through the articles and share information that is accurate, because there's so much that's been inaccurate in the news lately, and people are getting hurt because of it. So I'm on there way more than I should be right now.
For me, it tends to be, I try and limit it. And like I said, thankfully the new Facebook look has helped quite a bit. I've even installed occasionally a plugin in Firefox to limit it, because I would find myself looking at the cloud and be like, oh, well, now I've just spent an hour doom scrolling on Facebook and getting into internet arguments and things. So I try and limit it to as little a time as possible, other than like keeping Twitter open just to interact with people or, you know, browse once in a while. Yeah, I try and keep it as little part of my day as I possibly can now.
I think since the pandemic started,
Yeah,
why don't you go ahead this time, Murray?
okay. I stepped away from social media a couple of months back just for mental health, and now I'll go back in to post something from time to time or see if I have many any responses, but I try to avoid doom scrolling a lot, because it was a pattern to do it before I got out of bed. And so starting your day doom scrolling, not very good. So I've been having to force myself to step back from that, which is another reason why I'm so glad that my assistant's doing the promotional tweets now, because I don't even have to look at Twitter. So if I don't want to, but it's still used as a promotional tool.
I was just going to say, since the pandemic began, I've been using it way too much. I retired from my day job 4 years ago. I live by myself. I am unable to see many people because, well, the pandemic, and I'm diabetic and I'm overweight and I'm 70. So I tend to stay at home. And I think I've been to my oldest daughter's house once, and I've been to the dentist once. And those are the only places I've been besides my house since March. So I find sometimes that if I want to talk to somebody, I just have to go to social media. And I'm finding that the only way to stop that is I just ramp up my writing as much as possible. I kind of overload myself with projects and make sure I spend at least 4 hours a day writing. And sometimes if I'm tired enough after that, I don't feel like using social media. So that's great. So I think it is a problem.
And so I know, sorry, I'm formulating a question in my head as we go. I know that there are many authors who have social media presences that are very entwined with their lives, John Scalzi and his Burritos of Doom, things like that. How do you balance being just Mur or Steve or John or Joe versus being Mur the author, Steve the author, John the author, etc.?
I find I I don't separate them because it's too complicated. I thought about for a while about having a author Facebook page and a personal page, but it was just got to be a little bit too much. I basically have tried to set some rules up for my Facebook page and for my Twitter. I don't do politics. I don't do religion, even though I admire people who are able to do that. But I decided other people are doing that plenty enough, so I would just try to focus on writing and creativity. And I share music and I share inspirational things. I try to be as positive as possible on my messaging. And sometimes I have relatives who pop up in the middle of my conversation and ask me, well, have you seen cousin Emmy Lou and how's she doing? Right in the middle of a conversation about Game of Thrones. And because clearly my relatives don't understand social media yet very well. So that can be a little awkward, but for the most part, I've tried to keep those the same. So
Yeah, I think it's too much work. On one of my podcasts, I'm very, very open and vulnerable at times with because the podcast is for beginning fiction writers and trying to basically tell people that everything you're facing that you think you're alone in, pretty much all of us have felt in some way. So you're not alone. So I have been showing myself as a vulnerable, open person for 16 years. So I about the only thing I don't do is talk about personal family stuff and like editors or agents that have made me angry. But I'll pretty much talk about anything. I don't get into debates. I'm not good at that. But I don't like to talk about politics very much, but I'll talk about what I'm passionate about. So yeah, I don't really separate them. I know some people who do, but it feels like more people, it just feels like too much work.
Yeah, yeah, one more for the it's too much work. And especially for me, I found I've been on Twitter since shortly after they launched. So my Twitter account dates back way before my writing started. And so now I'm John Wilker, person on the internet, plus a writer. And yeah, my Facebook is probably the only one that's the most segmented because my personal Facebook I'm super liberal, and so you would not be confused by my Facebook posts. But my writer page is just book announcements, very focused. And my only policy really is like I don't friend people on Facebook that aren't family or immediately in-person friends. If they're fans, they can friend and follow the author page. But yeah, Twitter and Instagram less, because like Mary said, it's all photos. So I'm not going to post a political poster probably like that. I wouldn't do that. But yeah, it's me no matter what. And I'm like, well, if you don't want to follow me because I said one thing but you like my writing and you still read the books, that's fine with me. I'm okay with that. We don't have to agree on everything.
Yeah.
And I usually have to separate myself because of, the career that I've chosen. And in a way, it's helpful because when things become overwhelming, like in the public health arena or things I deal with during the day, I can shut that off and go into writer land, which is why I ended up writing for real, was to escape some of the really harsh realities that I see every day at work. So it's a little bit easier for me because I know what the line is, HIPAA, FERPA, stuff like that. That's helpful. And so I can't help but, segment it.
Yeah,
No,
makes
that
sense.
makes absolutely. I think I'd like to hear from Mur and Joe on this next question first, please. Have you had to deal, largely because I know the experiences of women on the internet are different necessarily than the experience of men. Have either of you had to, any of you had to deal with any backlash, trolling, campaigning, doxing, etc.?
Luckily, no. Like occasional trolls, but nothing nearly as bad as say Brianna Wu has dealt with. But I before I wrote the novelization to the Solo movie, and I figured I was the first woman to write a novelization of a Star Wars movie, and I figured somebody out there would be mad about something ladyish I got on the book. Got my nasty girl germs on the book. And so I talked to my friend Cameron Hurley, who's very, very good at managing social media. And she said, here's a ways to get some block lists. Just block a whole bunch of people at once who've been known to be troublemakers to people like you. And there's a way on Twitter you can only see replies of people who follow you. So the random trolls who jump in and go and crap all over what you just said and then leave, they're not going to follow you. They're not going to care. And so you're not going to see that. And there are a couple of other tools out there, and it's I put them all in, and the only thing I found is every once in a while when I search for myself in YouTube, I'll get Soilo author Mighty Mur sends SJWs on behalf to attack somebody on behalf of Chuck Wendig. And I'm like, there's so much wrong with that. I don't even know where to start.
The power you wield.
Yes, and the power I wield, the book Soilo, Soylo, the fact that
Oh,
they didn't
yeah.
even get my name right. I mean, Mighty Mur is like my username. I'm Mur Lafferty is on all my books, and there's just so many things wrong with that. And so I just laugh at that. But that's really the worst thing I've found. And I think partly I'm lucky, but partly I just tried to take every single tool available to me and lock down the ability for the trolls to touch me.
I haven't had a lot of problems, and I'm really good at ignoring people. And if they become really insistent about bothering me, I just block them because I'm too busy in day life and writer life to deal with small minds and people that are angry and lashing out because they think that you're an easy target.
I've been thankfully, like kind of to echo Scalzi, I being a cis white male, I'm pretty much coasting through the easy setting on the game. So the only trolls I deal with are the more like standard internet trolls. I've had someone once message me on LinkedIn of all things that my writing sucks. I was like, cool, thanks, you stranger on LinkedIn of all places. But that's kind of the extent of the trolling I've had to deal with, is just the generic drive-by stuff.
Yeah, I can't say that I've had to deal with a lot of that. Usually you see people posting really negative or nasty things on other people's pages, and I will unfriend people for things like that. I find the treatment of women on the internet will beyond appalling most of the time. I have five granddaughters, two daughters, three nieces, and I was married to a wonderful woman for 36 years, and I can't get my head around it sometimes. I wonder, sometimes it seems that people on every male on the internet is 12 years old. It seems that way sometimes, and I don't quite understand it. It's not the way I was when I was younger. So I talk to my daughters about it a lot, and I guess it just makes me angry and sometimes helpless.
I think the anonymity of the internet, on Twitter, I'm not tied to my personal name because I'm not an author and I don't need a huge following, can cause some of those behaviors. And I think too, we're just seeing an uptick in anger in general, it feels like. And people are feeling threatened that, like women are getting their cooties on Star Wars books and things like that. Um, so, what is the one thing you wish you'd known when you first started using social media as an author?
Hmm. Thankfully, it's not a super bad example. Be less forthcoming with personal information. Years and years ago, via like one of the check-in apps, a friend of mine from California when I was in high school, like ended up at my house, and he was like, "Yeah, I follow you on Twitter and on Bright Kite and some of these others, and like I dialed down and like figured out where you live just from your check-ins." I was like, "Okay, good to know." Friend finding me, super cool. We haven't seen each other in 10 years. Anyone else finding me, not something I look forward to. So that was probably my biggest takeaway. Was I'm open about almost everything, but yeah, no more checking in at home or doing anything that is more identifiable in that way.
I think for me, it's was realizing that people on the internet or on social media aren't the same people they are when you meet them. Some people are very, very different. Some people are a whole lot cruder and nastier on social media than they are in person, and I think that was kind of a shock to me at first. Um, I know that sometimes social media has this reputation of people being honest and speaking from the heart, but I find it's not the same. That isn't always the case for some people. I think some people put on a persona when they're on the internet, which isn't much like who they are in normal life. And so I tend to take statements made by people on social media with a grain of salt. So when I see something that someone has said that angers me, I always take a breath and I wait and see what happens, because I guess I wait to see if they're going to apologize, or I wait to see if there's more context to it so that I can understand it better. I think people in general uh, make an awful lot of assumptions on very little evidence, and that's kind of magnified on social media.
I don't know if I would have done anything different if I learned this, but seeing what hackers can do with bots has been terrifying in the past 5 years. And I don't know what I would have done with the information, but like John said, when Twitter came out in like what 2006, 7, it was exciting and fun, and you just, if you told me then what I know now about the bots and hackers and everything, it's terrifying. And yeah, I don't know what I would have done different, but I would have liked to have known that that was possible. And I love how you could have your tweet sent to your phone if you wanted to, but the minute somebody hacked Jack's phone, that feature went away real fast.
I
For
think I agree with everyone.
the owner of Twitter. Sorry, Joe.
No, it's okay, Meg. No, I kind of agree with everyone. Like, take everything with a grain of salt and try to be out there but private, like not easily findable, because that's a really scary thing, especially if you're not cis white male.
Who is one person, one author whose social media presence you really admire, or you really like how they're handling one aspect of it?
I'd say Cameron Hurley again, because another thing that she's done that I don't do very much is she also mutes a ton of keywords, a ton. Like when Cameron looks at Twitter, she sees like dog pictures and craft pictures, and it's like even good friends who are posting something political, she doesn't see it. So she's just locked it down completely. And I don't know if I would want to be completely out of the loop that way, but it certainly means that when you log into Twitter, you're going to have a pleasant time. And it's very unlikely you're going to see something horrific or wretched or something you wish you hadn't. So I admire how Cameron uses it.
Well, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think, at least when I was looking at it, Neil Gaiman's Twitter feed was amazing. Somehow he managed to, in just a few words, just give you a sense of just how large his life is and has been, and took you around the world. And I always found his tweets to be amazing and impressive.
Does anybody remember when he and Justin Bieber were racing to be the first people to get to 1 million followers? That was like what, 8 or so? I don't know, but it was pretty
very
funny to watch it
hilarious.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like the way Kat Valente does her Twitter. It's fun to read, and yeah, she certainly does not hold back on anything, but also it's not just, it's, I guess I like anybody who it's not just one thing, and hers is really good for that.
I have a soft spot for Stephen King, but I think he uses his platform, or at least he tries to use his platform for good and for compassion and common sense at times. And I kind of feel like we need that.
We have a shout out from the comments too for Kevin J. Anderson's Facebook pages. I haven't checked them out myself personally, but I've heard good things. You know, I agree. I really enjoy Cameron's Facebook or Twitter feed. I enjoy John Scalzi's. Neil Gaiman's always delightful. Kat's pictures of her kid and, you know, the peeks into her life and Heath's life are very nice to see.
Gail Carriger does a lot of pictures of tea and octopuses and
Yes.
fashion, and it's a very, very curated but very fun feed to read.
Yes, she is often my hit of dopamine for the day, besides things like hourly cats or bodega cats.
Yes.
Or there's a lot of cat pictures on the internet. It's great. So without naming names, who's one author out there that occasionally you look at their Twitter feed and you're like, oh, honey, no, or their social media?
How do you want us to answer that?
Yeah.
Sort of, what are they doing that you're like, maybe you shouldn't be doing this?
There's somebody who lives out loud the selfish and petulant feelings that I feel, and I'm grateful for them, because when they live that out loud, I see not to do that. I'm just like, wow, you sound awful. I know exactly where you're coming from, but you sound terrible, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm actually grateful that this person does that, because so I can see what not to do.
There you go. I can't think of any.
There's one.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, sorry. There's one in particular that sometimes I don't think they put any thought into their tweets at times, because just the way they say, and we can just say maybe a cis white male person, but like that entitlement, like they post something and they don't realize how it sounds, and it's like, wow. And you still have followers.
That part, as a cis white male, is often hard. There has been more than, I will admit, there have been times I've started to tweet and I'm like, no, this is crap. This is not right. Like, I'm going to shut up on this topic or whatever it is. Because, yeah, sometimes it's easy to forget that, yeah, that is not everyone else's experience.
Well, there are authors, usually newer authors, but not always, who complain a lot about reviews or things that their editors have done, or they complain about specific cover art, and basically they take their writing business and relationships with publishers public, and it almost never works out. It almost always looks petty, especially if they're talking about reviews and awards. I mean, that always looks awful. You should never comment on reviews ever. And I think when you take it to social media where everybody can see it and retweet it or quote it on Facebook, it's awful.
My personal pet peeve is, and it's generally newer authors in my experience, you follow someone because they look interesting and you immediately get the auto DM of, please buy my book.
Yeah, that is an immediate unfollow. It's like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah. And then my day job is a software engineering manager, and between the recruiters who don't say no, can't listen to no on LinkedIn, and the dudes who think it's a dating site, it's kind of a trash fire.
There's a certain etiquette, especially on Facebook, where a lot of newer authors really don't understand it or ignore it, and they will make a friend request and then immediately ask you to like their page. Now, that's a big no-no. I tend to be a little forgiving about it because I assume new authors haven't heard that before, or actually in some of the marketing books out there, they actually recommend you do things like that. So I'm more forgiving about that. I don't unfriend them, but it's the kind of thing that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and you can get ridiculed for doing that.
What I don't understand about that is that if they're just asking for likes, it's not even check out my work. It's like my page. And if you're just asking for tons of likes on your pages, are you really trying to get anyone to care about your work? Because you're not even asking them to read your book, which is also annoying, but still that at least is asking, will you judge my content, not just throw a like my way? Also, people who want you to follow them, it's like, if you're interesting, I'll follow you. I'm not just going to just follow you. I always get confused by that. Also, anybody who asks you why you unfollowed them, because they're never ever going to like the answer, ever. I've tried to answer them, and I should stop doing that. I'm stopping right now.
Usually when they ask that, I'm like, well, one is because you're the kind of person that uses a service that tells you who unfollowed you, and then two is whatever the real reason is. But one definitely is you're that person that uses the who followed and unfollowed me. I'm like, that was when those things launched back in the early Twitter days. It was cool and fun, and you tweet, hey, 39 new people followed me or unfollowed. But anymore, I'm like, yeah, if you don't want to follow me, that's totally cool. I get it. We can even still be friends. You just don't have to care what I say on Twitter.
Well, I'm a little confused about how it works because they've changed it a few times, but I believe on Facebook that once you friend someone, you're automatically following them, I believe.
That's correct.
So I've never decided to follow anybody. I have unfollowed some people without unfriending them because they were either family members or high school classmates that I wanted to stay in touch, but I couldn't bear to read what they said in their posts every day. So for those cases, I just unfollowed them, and if I wanted to see what was happening with them, I would check on their page.
Yeah, I wish Twitter had the same, snooze someone for 30 days functionality that Facebook has, so you could just get past whatever their cause du jour was. For me, I'm not a fan of Pinktober, and then move forward. So going back to what you said, John, about occasionally looking at your tweets and making sure you're not putting your foot in your mouth. Have any of you done that, and how did you recover?
I have. Less on Twitter. It was a blog post. My day job is doing conferences, and years ago, I wrote a post that in my head sounded super ally-y, and read in more modern context came off very much not that way. And it was someone randomly scrolled back through years of blog posts to find this blog post and then put it on Twitter, and then it exploded. And it was one of those things where I was just like, yep, this was not written well. I had everything wrong with this. I'm copying to. This was poorly worded. It was not good form. Thankfully, I had a few friends that were in the space that could at least come out and say, John isn't as terrible as this post makes him probably seem like. And so that helped. But for a day, literally, it was like, oh, today is my day where the internet hates me. And there's nothing like you mea culpa, you apologize, and you just ride it out. There wasn't anything, there's no arguing about it. It's like, this was terrible. And yes.
I did that on Feces book once. Like I shared something and it was attributed to the wrong person. And so someone came behind me and corrected me, and I'm all for being corrected. You know, if I'm posting something and something isn't 100%, it's kind of like how my job is. It's like the more I know, the better that I am. And so luckily it didn't blow up, but I just take the correction and move on and learn from it.
I've had a couple of instances where I thought someone was joking, and I replied in a joking way, only to discover they weren't joking. And so I just immediately apologized. I'm a strong believer in apologies. I apologize to my kids. I apologize to anyone I think I've done something wrong or I've made a mistake. And I find that often smooths over a lot of things if it's sincere.
Possible I've blocked something out, but I can't think of anything too terrible that I did a blog post that went semi-viral and just got a lot of opinions, but not really people angry at me or telling me I'm wrong or telling me I'm racist or something. But I don't know. My favorite thing is I knew someone was cheating on their spouse, and then they just posted to Twitter one day, "I love you too." And you realize that was supposed to be a DM. And watching them try to backpedal from telling all of Twitter that they love them was interesting to watch.
Yikes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a yikes moment.
Oops.
No, absolutely. Let's see, we're at about 10 minutes till. Audience, if you have any questions, please let's throw them forward for our Q&A. So we've talked about things to avoid. We've talked about people who we really admire. Let's just sum it up. Can I get everybody's sort of elevator pitch length philosophy of social media?
Mine, I guess, would be don't take it too seriously, but it's a fun way to engage with friends, family, and fans. That's about it.
I would say limit your time and be careful what you say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, double check what you're about to write. But on the positive side, I'd say it's incredibly powerful in reaching fans. You know, when I was younger, I remember I wrote letters to authors almost all the time, and I got one back. And that is like still encased in plastic somewhere among my most treasured items. And now you can just go at Neil Gaiman. He may not answer, but you can do it. And it's like, it's the connection with authors and people you are fans of is much more there. Again, they may not answer, but you know, it's a much more intimate connection than we had before. And so it's a great way to connect with people you admire and people who are your fans, but it also gives people a little feeling of entitlement into your life, which is the downside. It's a really long elevator. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're
It's a
fine.
tall building.
Yeah, tall building. Thank you.
I would say, yeah, it's a great way to interact with people, but also take it with a grain of salt.
That absolutely makes sense. Questions from the audience?
Don't be
No.
shy.
Advice from the audience? obviously, I suppose we should have you all put in a plug for your social media presence.
Well,
Should we put it in the chat? Oh, sorry.
That'd be great. I can then copy it over to the Discord. You can also just say it.
Well, you can go to stevetim.com, and that pretty much has everything you want to know. I mean, there are links to all my social media there, as well as a bibliography and everything else.
Yeah, for me, johnwilker.com has all of my social media links. I'm either J Wilker or John T Wilker on pretty much everything.
My website is merverse.com, but on almost all social media, you can find me at Mighty Mer. It might be a dead account, but that's
But
where
it's you.
That's me. Yes.
It's just easier to go to my website, joefontana.com. There's a links page, has everything there, or most everything.
Awesome. Cool. Any last thoughts for the audience?
Thanks for
Not
being
really.
here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yes. Thank you for moderating on the spot, Meg.
Always
Yeah.
happy to.
Well done.
Thank you.
You.
I was a little worried. I was looking at the moderator questions I'd sent and then hurriedly scribbling a few more. So I'm glad it turned out okay. Excellent. Then I think we will probably end it there since we don't seem to have any questions. Darn it, people. You should have questions. You can always ask questions in the Asgard room. If our panelists have time, they will drop in there and say hello. And thank you, everyone. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good to see
Take
ya.
care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. This was fun.